7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Happy Sunday, CROC Nation. Dr. Tommy and Ellie here with you again with another amazing CROC podcast to help you through your journey of survivorship. Joining me, as always, my loyal, tail wagging, tongue licking, cheek licking, treat biting pal and co-host, Angel Santana. Have faith, let it begin. Angel, how are you?
I'm a little bit disturbed from that intro, but I'll say I'm okay now. Yes. What's up?
Angel, I went with the loyal dog analogy and I flopped miserably, but that's okay. We take chances on our podcasts.
Isn't that the truth? Welcome, man. Welcome back.
Yeah, good to be here. So I love being in the middle of a module. I'm like knee deep in this module and I'm really enjoying it. And for those of you joining us fresh without having heard last week's podcast, what we're trying to do is put together a few podcasts to help you guys navigate the process of getting a second opinion. So we'll do a little review, but we'll start with basically a little vignette, a little overview, a little sort of bird's eye view, and then we'll kind of cone in and cone down into the subject. So basically, you guys have a lot on your plate. You've just been diagnosed with your cancer. And remember, this is all new to you. If you're a new survivor, you don't know anything about cancer. The only thing you know is some of your inherent prejudices and biases about cancer. You may have had a family member who died of cancer, and you may be convinced, 100% convinced, that you're going to die from cancer, even though Angel and I will tell you you will not. And you're freaked out, and you're already going into the doctor's office at a disadvantage. To make things worse, it's not a perfect system. It's a disease that's very complicated. It's a disease that's very confusing. It's a disease with a lot of moving parts. It's a disease with a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of things you have to work through in the beginning, and there's going to be points of your treatment plan or points of your disease that are not going to be exactly crystal clear because you're evolving. It's a new case. Information is being sought and obtained. Things are changing at a drastic pace. And the last thing you need is to not know what's going on, and you deserve to know what's going on. And then somebody has the great idea of saying, hey, listen, you're going to Memorial Sloan Kettering for a second opinion. That's all there is to it. We're going to set it up and we're going to go. And that's kind of where we started, Angel. We started on trying to set the table for seeking a second opinion and where it is derived. And some of the things we talked about last week, and we certainly recommend that if you haven't listened to last week's podcast, you do so. We talk about geography, and we talk about proximate and distal geography. Where you get your second opinion is something we talked about. So we happen to live in the Hudson Valley, which is about an hour and 20 minutes or an hour and 30 minutes from New York City. There's some of the best cancer centers in the world in New York City. But what if you live in Butte, Montana? What if you live, in Missoula, Missouri? Or what if you live in Bangor, Maine? Maybe you don't have that luxury. So, it's sometimes a curse and an advantage to living in a big city, and sometimes it's not, but we'll be talking about that, or we did talk about that. We talked about the difference in the level of care between a big, what we call, fancy word for the day, Angel, tertiary cancer center, which is a center which is devoted only to cancer, a center that's devoted to research in the attempt to try to cure cancer, such as the Memorial Sloan Kettering, et cetera. And we talked about in some places and in some circumstances, you may get a different level of care in some of these centers. So you might get really good care in your community, but you might get really great care in one of the tertiary care centers. So we need to help you guys figure out when and where that would be appropriate. Then we talked about some of the advantages of a second opinion. We talked about how you could definitely get peace and you can get contentment and you'll feel a trust and you'll have a clearer idea of what's going on. But there's some disadvantages too. It could cause you to become more confused if you go to the wrong place, or there might be more questions. You might be opening up a whole can of whoop ass, that you weren't anticipating by going to seek a second opinion. And the other thing you worry about is you worry about the potential for tarnishing your relationship with the doctors who may be the ones that ultimately take care of you. And you're afraid that if you go for this second opinion, or if you ask too many questions, or if you make yourself a little bit too mightier than now because you went for a second opinion, that it might ruin, or at least as the word I would use is tarnish, that relationship with the people that might ultimately take care of you, either because of proximity, cost, convenience, or insurance par. You don't want to do that either. So you have to be careful. We also talked about a paper that was called the meta-analysis, meaning it gathered maybe about 10 different papers talking about the pluses and minuses of getting a second opinion. And they did some demographics. And we mentioned that between 1 and 88% of patients, cancer survivors, seek a second opinion, depending on what paper you read. Most survivors who took advantage of a second opinion had a higher level of education, maybe a college degree or even higher. Most of them found that they wanted a second opinion because they wanted a more personal experience, or they wanted certainty where they weren't getting certainty in the community, or there was a discrepancy in between 2 and 51% of the patients who went for a second opinion. They were afraid that perhaps the two sides didn't agree, which is again concerning. And they also lacked trust or had dissatisfaction from the initial consultation they had. So, Angel, I think that's a good overview of what we did last week.
Absolutely. And I encourage everyone to go back, to start this particular module and all the other episodes that we have available. It was something that I could relate to, as well in the medical, in a non-cancerous way. So this is really a good opportunity for us to have a completely overview of what we would do in our personal environment if we do need or seek a second opinion.
Exactly. So last week we talked about again the why and the when to get a second opinion. And today we're going to be talking in part 2 about the how. How does a survivor go about in getting a second opinion? And you would think it would be really simple, right? You pick up the phone, you call Memorial Sloan Kettering, and you say, "Hey, I got cancer. You got to get me in tomorrow. I need a second opinion." I wish it was as easy as that. So Angel, where we're going to start tonight is in a very uncomfortable place. And it's uncomfortable, and I could relate to the discomfort of this situation because I'm very, 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 let me make myself clear, very, very, very bad at conflict. I'm really bad at trying to confront somebody. I'm really bad at trying to talk about uncomfortable things with people. So anybody out there who's going to have difficulty trying to talk to your initial or original oncologist about the thought that you're going to want to go for a second opinion might seem overwhelming, and I completely understand. Angel, I think you're a little better than I am at conflict and confrontation. I think it's a maturity thing, but certainly that's one of my issues. How about you when you're talking about going for a second opinion?
I would say I'm in the middle, believe it or not. I think in the business aspect, if it's something that I know should be right, I can hold my own. But I think it's when you are in a situation where you're feeling a little gray, and it pertains to yourself in a non-confrontational way, meaning regarding a product, but more about your health. I think it's a little hard to be combatant.
The other thing that's really interesting, that was very well said. Thank you. What I was going to say was what might make it harder is a lot of times when we think about going for a second opinion, a lot of the listeners might think, well, we hate our local doctor, or we think our local doctor is terrible, or we really think they don't know what they're doing. But what would make, and that, in my opinion, would probably make it a little easier. What might make it a little harder is if you actually like your, the first oncologist that you see, or they actually are caring and really, feel badly for you and they held your hand and while you cried with you. And then all of a sudden you're going to tell them, "Hey, by the way, I want to have a second opinion." getting back to that, tarnishing that moment that you shared together, or feeling that you're being ungrateful or not loyal to that person. And I want to just, stop right there and kind of spend a minute on that. Medicine is not what it was in the old days. I think we started the podcast last week about a story about a colleague of mine that came to mind, and there were many, not just this one, but a guy who was a very good clinician. A patient would come in. If they asked him for a second opinion, he kicked them out of the office and said, never come back. Things are a lot different. And I just want to reinforce it. And again, take a minute and really, really make you guys feel comfortable that when you go to an office and you ask for a second opinion, you're going to be very professional. You're going to be very caring. You're going to be very upfront. You're going to be very kind. You're not going to be demeaning. You're just going to say, and we're going to tell you what to say. And if there's anybody who gives you a hard time, that's not the office you want to be in anyway. So I just want to let you guys know, do not be intimidated. Even if you love that guy or that woman or that practitioner who broke the news to you and they did it in a really caring and wonderful way, and you really do trust them, but you live really close to the city as we do, or even if you don't and you want to take advantage of that televisit type of second opinion, please, that is your right to do that. And in many cases, especially in rarer types of cancers or cancers that have a lot of inclarity, which we talked about last week, that is absolutely right. So what are some of the things you want to say to your doc? What are some of the, some of the buzzwords? So here's a few, Angel, and then I'm going to have you maybe give us a few, and you're great. You're so good with words. Hey, doc, I'm thinking of getting a second opinion. Can you recommend someone? So you're using them to assist you in getting to that, situation. You're including them. You're being transparent. You're being truthful. And I think the new practitioners would appreciate that. Before we start treatment, doc, I'd like to get a second opinion. Will you help me with that? Again, you're engaging your primary physician, your primary oncologist, who may very well be the one who ends up taking care of you anyway. I've had many patients, as you know, my famous line after I introduce myself and go through my spiel is answer questions and offer a second opinion. So 90% of the patients that I see end up coming back even after second opinion. So if your doctor has a head on their shoulders, they would know that. Hey, doc, if you had my type of cancer, who would you see for a second opinion? Who do you think is the best in prostate cancer, lung cancer, colorectal cancer, breast cancer? Because a lot of these centers, they have dedicated oncologists who only do that specific type of cancer. They have doctors that only do lung cancer. They have doctors that only do breast cancer and doctors that only do prostate cancer. So, these are some of the things, again, we talked about last week. So it's really, really important for you guys to ask those questions. Angel, give me a couple of other ways that our survivors can approach their primary oncologist with and break the news that they want to have that second opinion.
I've actually said something to along the lines of, hey, listen, I know that you are good at what you do. I think if we can get another person involved and have two of the best, who would you recommend? That's what I've done.
Wow, that's great, Angel. That's beautiful.
Because I have felt comfortable with one of my doctors, but I did want a second opinion. It was the God's honest truth. Now, here's the question, what you just said, what if it's the doctor you really are not too comfortable with? To be very honest with you, I think that if I'm not comfortable with that doctor, I wouldn't even tell them that I was getting a second opinion, and then base the opinion, put the two opinions together and then determine who I think I'm going to go back to. I know it's a little bit off topic, but it can happen.
Actually, it's not off topic, because that's going to be part 3, is talking about when to change doctors. So, we actually are going to hit that next week. But what you're going to find out next week, I'm going to let you sort of time travel for a minute and then we'll go back, is I'm not going to recommend not telling the doctor.
Gotcha.
I'm always going to be advocating for complete and utter transparency, both to the practice from my point of view, from my side of the ball. I'm always going to be, screaming to make sure every practitioner is always truthful and ethical with their patients. And I'm going to say the same thing to the survivor. I'm going to ask them to have that same transparency back to their doctors.
Let me point out one more thing that did actually happen to my son. So when we got a second opinion, the person that we had the second opinion with, who was the best in their field, according to the original referral, this was a referral. She recommended, the doctor recommended another colleague from another location. So now it became 3 heads.
What we're going to be talking about that tonight as well.
All right, I'm ahead of the game. I love it.
Yeah, you know what? We time traveled a week. Can we come back? Hold on.
Let's go.
Wait. We came back. There we go. And we have to find out if Professor Brown is still alive.
Yeah. Great Scott.
If he read the note, right? I also want to talk to you guys about, and I think I said this, right, Angel? Any doctor who would make you feel bad or interrogate you or ask you to justify why you want to get a second opinion, again, that's not the environment you want to be in anyway.
Right.
So, that's my position. But I get it, guys. I understand. If you feel uncomfortable or you're not good with confrontation, believe me, Dr. E, he's right there with you. I also want to teach you guys tonight something very important. Again, this is the how on how to get a second opinion. And it really could also be named, the podcast could be named, not only how to get a second opinion, how to do it right? How to do it right. So one of the ways of doing a second opinion correctly is becoming the master of your medical record. So you have to become, here's going to be our slogan: be OCD like E. So you have to be as OCD as I am, and you have to make your medical record sort of like your vault. That's your stock, your portfolio. That's the gold, the gold that you invested in. That's your, your dead grandfather's pocket watch that he left you. That is like, you are going to protect that information like it's like nobody's business. Our New York Mets 2 World Series trophies, we only have 2. You're going to protect those trophies like to the end of the world. So I'm going to tell you also, medical records are not what you think they are. They're, in this electronic world, it's easier but harder because you get put into a state of complacency thinking, well, my doctors just can email each other over the records. Let me tell you something right now. Only about 5% of the people, I'm one of them, actually follow through and send records when they're asked to. They don't have time. They don't care. They don't make it a priority. I even Federal Express records and films and discs and pathology slides for the patients because I know how important it is that the referring hospital has everything they need. And we're going to talk about that in a second too. Wow. But let's talk about what the medical record is comprised of. So your medical record is not always electronic. Sometimes there's some paper parts. Sometimes there's CD discs and sometimes there's slides. So make sure you know that. There's also a thing called a release form. You have to make sure you sign your release form so the records can be sent over from one institution to another, because that will hold things up for sure. I've had 2 doctors in my entire career refuse to send medical records, and I got so angry I wanted to put them up under, for criminal charges, but I never got around to it. But in my opinion, that's criminal. The other thing is what is in that medical record. So you want to have your initial medical records from your oncologist. You want your operative notes. You want your pathology notes. You want your x-ray reports. You want to have your treatment plans. You want to have your consults and office notes and all that kind of stuff. That's the easy part. Getting the slides and the discs of all the x-rays you've had. You might have had PET scans. You might have had x-rays or bone scans or MRIs. Now, if you have an MRI report and you hand it to that center, they're going to laugh at you and say, this is not what we need. This is just partial. They're not only going to want to take, because I don't trust anybody. I look at all my films and they certainly do too. You can't just present them with a piece of paper that says, okay, there's this little lesion in L1. You have to have the discs, and you can't just send them a pathology report. You have to send them the pathology slides. Those slides have to be there as well. So it's really, really important that you know what you got to do. Again, be OCD BE. That's really, really super important. So that's getting yourself around the medical record. Now, the other thing we want you to know is we want you to know what the process of second opinions are in each center, and they vary. So the way things work, and I'll give you my own personal experience, and we're going to get to the where in a minute, but being so close to New York, obviously I work with all the big cancer centers in New York City. I also work with some referring cancer centers all over the country and sometimes over the world. And I have spoken to some of the top oncologists, Nobel Prize winning oncologists, researchers, all that type of thing. And I have never seen a process more complicated or more off-putting or more delaying than Memorial Sloan Kettering. Getting a second opinion from Memorial Sloan Kettering is almost walking on water. It's one of the hardest things I have, and it actually had resulted in a situation where for a while, I was actually trying to find other places to send my patients for second opinions because of the difficulty it is. Now, to be fair to Memorial Sloan Kettering, they're very busy. If you think about it, they're the brand, right? I mean, no matter where you go in the country, there's two hospitals you hear immediately. You hear Memorial Sloan Kettering and you hear MD Anderson Cancer Center. Those are the two brands of cancer care excellence in this country or in the world. And you could imagine their phones probably never stop ringing. Anywhere from Dubai to Coral Gables, Florida, to Kalamazoo, Michigan, to Sri Lanka, where, their phones must ring nonstop. So, and again, to their credit, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that the experience that the patient has will be appropriate. So number one is first of all, you have to send all of your records to them before they even tell you they're going to see you. It's almost like it's like applying to a college, and not just a small college. It's like applying to Harvard, right? Number two is they have to review it. Now we're already a week out already, maybe 2 weeks, because it's not easy getting your records. Then once they decide that they will see you and they know a person that they want to see you in whatever satellite, either in the mothership in New York City or one of the satellite centers, then that's going to take another week or two for you to get in there. So it's really important that you guys know, if you want to go to Memorial, fantastic. What's better than Memorial? But I want to make sure and I'm using Memorial, I'm picking on them. I'm sure we're going to get, if anybody listens to our podcast, we're going to get a letter from their attorneys like tomorrow. But the truth of the matter is, you have to know that process. The other thing I want you guys to be sure you understand, I'm going to tell you a funny story, not a funny story, but actually a very poignant story about insurance. So just because you got cancer, and you are deserving, that's why Angel and I do this every week. And just because you feel you need a second opinion, which again, Angel and I are doing a whole module on, doesn't mean that your insurance company will agree with us. Doesn't mean that your insurance company will do the right thing. Doesn't mean that your insurance company will send you to where you want to go. Some insurance companies have special deals or they have special relationships with certain hospitals. So I'm going to tell you the story of Paul. So Paul was a young man, of course, his name has been changed, who presented with a very unusual, difficult tumor in his head and neck, which went all the way up from the neck, all the way up to the brain. It was a life-threatening situation. So Paul called me and I said, Paul, I can't do anything with this. You need to go see somebody in Westchester. So I sent him to my friend, Simon Hanft, a neurosurgeon in Westchester. Simon called me and said, Tom, you know what? I do a lot of things, but this is not one that I really have a particular expertise on. And this kid could bleed out on the table and die. and he's young, and this is big, this is big stuff. We need to send him to Dr. X at New Jersey Medical School. So I get in touch with Dr. X at New Jersey Medical School, and I said, again, medical records. I FedEx him the medical records for Paul. I Federal Express him the discs. He looks at the case and he wants to do the surgery like the next day, because this is a case, right? This is a case of a lifetime, where it's almost like, when a pediatric neurosurgeon gets to do Siamese twins, he probably trains his entire life, to do one or two cases. This is exactly that type of thing. So then his insurance company calls me and they tell me, I'm sorry, Paul is not approved to go to this center for the second opinion or for this procedure. So anyway, to make a long story short, the insurance company, who are devils, but in this case, there was a small angel that was working in this devilish company, got a liking to Paul and found another physician at a big center in New York City. He had the surgery. It was a success. His life was saved. But again, you have to know the process in your insurance coverage. And, when we talk about expectations, which is coming up, we'll make sure that you don't get yourself too hyped up. It's like you want to get that red truck and you want that exact red truck. And you know what? You go to pick up that big red truck and the guy says it costs X amount of money and you only have X amount of money minus $2,000, and you can't have that big red truck. And you get another red truck, which is awesome, but it's just it's $2,000 less awesome than the other big red truck. And instead of going home like thrilled that you have this great red truck, you're pissed because you didn't have the other red truck. So we're going to make sure that your expectations are appropriate. The other thing that's really cool about second opinions in the city and these big tertiary care centers is that they talk a lot about, clinical trials. I work in a community hospital, as you know, about 1 trillion times, and we do have clinical trials as well. But the clinical trials we have are really trickled down from the big New York City hospitals, or even the national, thing. So, just to give you guys some heads up as far as that goes. In regard to where to go, so we're going to talk about New York City, and then we're going to move on from New York City. But sometimes you live in a city or live in a suburb, you live on a farm, you live on a mountain, you live in the beach or wherever, and you're not that close to a big tertiary care center. And there is one, but it's 3 hours away, and that's like your only hope for a second opinion. And that's fine. If you lived in, just say, Apex, North Carolina, you drive 3 hours to go to Duke University, right? Or the University of North Carolina. And that's fine, but that's where you have to go. If you live in Walden, New York, and you want a second opinion and you want to go to New York City, you can go to NYU, you can go to Columbia, you can go to Memorial Sloan Kettering, you could go to Mount Sinai, you go to Beth Israel, you could go to Lenox Hill, you could go to Montefiore, you could go to Westchester. I'm sure I'm missing somebody. And if I did, I don't mean to diss any program in the city, but I just named about 10 centers that are world-class institutions. But you don't always have that. So how can Angel and I help talk you off of the ledge in regard to which one to choose? Well, what you have to do when you're doing your research for yourself, your due diligence, as we call it, you have to realize that some centers are specialized in certain sites or certain things. So neurosurgery and melanoma, NYU, no question. You want to have if you have pancreatic cancer or pancreaticobiliary tumors, you want to go to Columbia. If you have prostate cancer, you want to go to my friend Mike Zalewski at Memorial. And if you have a myeloma, you want to go to the blood guys, the hematologists at Mount Sinai. So each of these hospitals, they're good at everything, but there's certain things that they're just known for, that they might have international expertise. Angel, I think you've come across that.
Absolutely. There's so many different things that have come up, and you can go from one edge of the the spectrum to the other, even in longitude and latitude, my friend.
Absolutely. I promised you, Angel, that we were going to talk about managing expectations, right? We talked about the red truck and being prepared mentally. We said being prepared on the business side, being prepared practically with your getting your medical records together, knowing the policies of each of the hospitals you're working with. Now I'm going to help you on the mental side, on the cerebral side, on the human side, and that's managing your expectations. So number one, don't get your hopes up. Make sure your insurance covers you for that particular institution. Number two, one expectation is you're going to go to this opinion and all of the scales are going to fall from your eyes. And you're going to have a Paul on the road to Damascus moment where he has a vision from God. And all of a sudden, Paul, the son of a bitch, becomes Paul, like the greatest saint that ever was, the father of Christianity, the guy who really made things happen for Christians. You can become that. But that's not usually what happens. Sometimes that opinion doesn't clarify things. Sometimes there's a discrepancy between the findings of the first doctor and your doctor in your hometown. So I want you to be prepared. Not that you're going to leave there knowing the answers to, how to get world peace or how to get your cure. Sometimes you may not be leaving with that. It may be just a step on that journey, right? So to get from one side of an overflowing river to the other, you have to step on the stones that are exposed and skip over each stone until you get to the other end. This is a process. So you need to realize that this is a process. If both opinions are substantially in agreement, but don't 100%, line up, then you have some research to do. Easy. If the opinions are exactly the same, then your decision is easy. You just have to decide whether you want to stay in your backyard or whether you feel the necessity to go to the tertiary care center. And we're going to talk about that as well. You have to make sure that each of your doctors that you go to, believe it or not, even in the tertiary care centers, you want them to wow you. You want them to talk about, you want them to quote papers. You want them to quote research. You want them to tell you about clinical trials. You want them to say, hey, listen, you could take this drug, and here's the side effects, and here's the efficacy according to the, Stampede trial, according to Keynote 522, according to this, to the Aspire trial, to that, to this. You want them to wow you. You want them to be nerds. You want them to know everything about your disease, right? So I want you to be happy when they talk about that. And I want you, and here is the most important thing of all. You ready? This is the number one. I feel like I'm the guy on Family Feud, right? What is the number one answer of one of the expectations that isn't met? So say you go to this second opinion and you don't understand what they're telling you. You think you do, you nod your head like you do, and you leave there and you have no idea. Yeah. So this is the disconnect. The number one problem I find in my practice is I go through things, Angel, like, with my OCD, it's like I go from A to B to C to D to E to F. I don't miss F to go to G ever.
Right. You don't mix and match.
And I don't go to G until I am convinced that you understand A, B, C, D, E, F 100% in my mind. Yeah. I feel that I've conveyed that information to you. And you're giving me the body language and you're nodding your head and you're making me feel that you're receiving this information.
Right.
And you have it in your head and it's yours. You own that information. And then I get a call the next day from the therapist or the nurse who says, you know what? That's Santana. He just called. He doesn't have an effing clue as to what's going on. Not a clue. Doesn't even, not even close to a clue as to what's going on. It happens to me every day, many times a day. So you guys can't be that person. You can't be Santana. Right. You have to be responsible. It's your responsibility to stay in that room take your notes, bring someone with you,
Yes.
record the conversation, do your research before you go, so you understand the keywords and you understand what's going to be said most likely, and you don't let that doctor leave until you 100% know exactly what they're telling you. And if I didn't say it clearly, if I spoke Spanish, I would say it to you in Spanish, just to be clear. This is really, really, really important. Angel?
I'll tell you, it's amazing when you hear it from your point of view, and then, of course, hearing it from ourselves, and how it really deems down to communication and really knowing everything that is being taught, because it is an education, and being able to dissect, being able to feel comfortable and ask questions and articulate what is being said, whether it's acronyms, whether it's hospital talk, and be able to decipher what it is that is being explained to you, so that you can walk out, just as positive, even with a negative, impact.
Yeah, and also the other thing, Angel, which is really the reason why I think it's going to be really clear to everybody who even knows me or has gotten to know me through my podcasts, is that, Angel, do I talk like a doctor?
Absolutely not.
Do I look like a doctor?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So even me, and am I a good communicator?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if I have a problem, because I can talk I could talk to a farmer. I could talk to a farmer who got kicked in his head by a mule and has half of his brain squashed. I could talk to that guy. I can talk to somebody from the city who's in a gang. I could talk to somebody who's like the Queen of England. I could talk to anybody and I could get them to understand me. So it is really important, especially if you're in a situation where you and your doctor are coming from different worlds, and that doctor isn't able to bring themselves to your world. And I'm not saying bring themselves down to your world at all. Doctors and patients, guess what? We're equal. We don't have anything on you guys. We're not better than you. Just because we went to school a little longer, just because we have a special skill, just because we have a gift from God, by the way, not from us. All of our healing comes from God. Just because of all that doesn't mean we're better than you or that whatever. It's our obligation to connect with you, to get on the same page with you. But what your responsibility is, if it ain't happening for you, you got to let us know. And you have to say, we got to do this again. Or you know what? I need to just digest this. And doc, I might need another appointment with you to just make sure I understand this. I mean, if the doctor has, if the doctor is one of those kind of doctors, and believe it or not, Angel, you're going to be shocked. Those doctors at Memorial, NYU, Beth Israel, Mount Sinai, you would think that those guys would be the guys that would put one foot in the room, say hello, listen with their stethoscope, and step out of the room and let the residents take care of things. They don't do that.
No.
We do that. The community doctors do that. Those guys, those specialists, they'll spend an hour. They'll spend 2 hours. They'll spend 3 hours with you. They'll spend as much time as they have to. And they could not give a rat's ass if the next patient has to wait 2 hours to wait for them to see them, because they are really devoted people. When I complain about Memorial and the process and all that, I'm not talking about the doctors. The doctors are amazing. I mean, I am enhanced every time I get to work with some of these doctors. They teach me things. They're so wonderful. So if you can get your foot in the door and actually get that opinion, you will not be dissatisfied. But I think we put a lot of time into that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about how now to make sense of that second opinion. And to my friend Angel Santana's point, do you need a third opinion? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So when we talk about making, when we talk about, do you need that third opinion? Here's what we talk about. Sometimes when you want to make sense of that opinion, you want to make sure that you make another appointment with the first oncologist that you met with, and you call and say, hey, I got my second opinion. I would like to sit down with you and talk to you about it. So number one. So now you get the first doctor who had an opinion, the second doctor's opinion you have. If your primary doctor, your first oncologist is good, he or she would have already spoken to that doctor already before you even walk in the room. And everybody, all my survivor thrivers and whoever listens to this podcast, if I ever use the word he, more than I use the word she, I apologize. It's just because that's my gender. I absolutely do not, please don't take offense to that, at all. I'm not a, what would you say, Angel? I'm not a
Chauvinist.
chauvinist. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Number two is I want you to ask both doctors to explain how they arrived at their opinion and their treatment plan. We want you to ask how they interpreted your test results. We want you to ask them what research studies or professional guidelines. That's another one. You guys are going to have access to NCCN guidelines. We actually should do that on a podcast so you guys know how to do that, but you'll actually be able to know what the standard of care is, because remember, we did a module on shared decision-making. Guys, you have a job. You can't just go there and be passive. You're part of that team. You're part of your own team. And we already said that. You want to know what research studies, as we said, what recommendations that they gave to other patients in your same situation. You want to make sure that the two doctors review your case and talk together. And you might also need a third opinion from another specialist. And again, do your own research. And we're going to remind me, Angel, we'll do a podcast on the National Comprehensive Cancer Treatment Guidelines, the NCCN.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But getting back to that third opinion. So where would that third opinion come up? Angel, share that beautiful story about that third opinion on Noah.
Yeah. So, it was a pediatric neurologist, to be clear. And she was, referred by our pediatrician. We went to her, and while she was looking at Noah's head, she determined that she would need her own second opinion within a colleague within the industry. So they went out and got a second opinion. We went to see that specialist. They put their heads together and finally gave us a third specialist, and they all communicated, and the job got done, and we were able to determine that what he had wasn't as as serious, and it was treatable.
Awesome. Angel, thank you for sharing that personal information. Just to be clear, as you guys probably are getting into now your cancer diagnosis and your survivorship, you probably already know there's at least 3 types of oncologists. So and these are just general categories. There's the surgeon, right? There's the oncologist, and there's the radiation oncologist. So just to give you an example for certain cancers where you might need that third opinion. So I see patients with prostate cancer probably every day. And I think it's really important, especially with patients who have more advanced prostate cancer, that they see all 3 of us, that they see the surgeon, the medical oncologist, and the radiation oncologist. And then things get a little more complex. What if you see the radiation oncologist who wants you to see another radiation oncologist who's a specialist, kind of like Angel's, vignette, about Noah. So sometimes you need to see a third opinion on someone who's in a different discipline. And sometimes you need to see a second opinion or third opinion on someone in the same discipline, but someone who might super specialize in that particular problem. So that's where you make your decisions about going to see a third doctor, as far as that goes. And make sure, Angel, all of the doctors have to talk. And
Yes.
the famous question that I always advise everyone to do is ask that question, Doc, if it was you, what would you do? If I was your wife, if I was your mother, if I was your sister, if I was your daughter, what would you do? How would you advise me to move forward? And we're going to end this podcast with the last point, which is how to judge if the second opinion actually merits becoming your team, your treatment team. And this is going to segue into the third part of the module, which is how to change doctors. So you're trying to decide, right, if the inconvenience of traveling, the expense and cost of traveling is going to be worth it to you. So here's a couple of things to think about, and then we're going to hit this hard next time. You're going to want to look at your comfort level. Is the doctor that you first saw in your community, do you have a comfort with them? Are you starting to develop a relationship with them? And again, this is assuming that, each side is basically espousing the exact same treatment plan. Do you feel that you can have a long-term lifetime relationship with this person? Do you feel that that person is concerned about you as a human being? Do you think that when they leave the room, they ever think about you again? I saw this, I hit 60 a couple of years ago, and I figured maybe it's a good time to see a cardiologist. And I walked into the cardiologist, and the first appointment I had with him, I had absolutely the greatest, experience. And he told me to do 10 things and come back in 3 months. And I did the 10 things, and I came back, and he said, "Hey, how you doing?" I go, "Fine." And he said, "Well, why are you here?" I go, "Because you told me to come back in 3 months." He goes, "I did." And he goes, "Well, why did you get this test?" And I said, "Because you told me to get it." He goes, "Well, why didn't you get this test?" "Because you told me not to get that test." And it was like he never met me before. Do you feel that your doctor, if they were to see you online at Trailside Treats in Goshen by the Goshen Trail, if you were behind them in line and you were going to get your soft serve ice cream, vanilla and orange swirl, are they going to know who you are? So that's one question to ask. Number two, is there a real quality difference? So say they do agree, right? Everybody's in agreement, but one side, so community hospital has a really good oncologic surgeon, and they did, pancreatectomies or Whipple procedures, we call them, when they were in training. And since training, they've done 1 in 5 years. You
Wow.
may be comfortable with them. They may agree with the plan that they have at Columbia, and Mike Kluger or John Chabot sees you, and they do 5 in a day. Then the answer. You're going to go to the city to take care of that, because there's a difference between good and great, and your experience will be predicated on that. Like my advice to my kids in college, pick the professor, don't pick the time that's convenient. So if they have to take Bio 101 and the teacher that's fantastic is at 7 a.m. on Monday morning or at 8 p.m. on Friday night, no matter how it impacts their life, take the professor. You do the same thing in medicine if it's somebody that you're going to have a difference in quality. Is your experience about a certain condition? As I said, the same as point 2. Does that doctor in the tertiary care center just have so much experience that you really have to spend the extra money and the extra effort to do that? That would be the experience. And the other thing is sometimes these big hospitals might have the clinical trial that you're looking for, in which case, obviously, you go to the big center. Angel Santana, I went over again 2 weeks in a row. I'm telling you, the board of directors are not going to be happy with me.
Like I said before, I think there are certain shows, or I should say episodes, that you just you can't be timed. And I think that you hit all points. It would have been hard to put this into 2 segments, because you don't want to lose that transition. And people would probably forget what you talked about from week to week when it's such a very high profiled episode. So I would disagree that we went over. I think we did enough time on it.
Excellent, my friend. And how could I ever thank you? Anybody struggling and needs some spiritual boost, a little bit of a energizer, Angel Santana, Have Faith, Let It Begin. Every morning during the week, amazing, great stories, great faith, great man. Rod Freeman, who's going to be a co-host one week with us here on both Have Faith, Let It Begin, as well as the CROC podcast. All kidding aside, Rod, thanks for everything you do for us and our survivors. Michael John Benzea and Charlotte Larson for your support and belief in us. Board of directors, we thank you every week for all the for listening to our podcast, give us feedback, coming to, talk to us and try to make the world a better place for the survivors, and utilizing your talent and your time. Thank you. God bless you. My pep talk, Angel. So you just got hit over the head with a hammer. You have cancer. I get it. Everybody you've ever met in your life, family members, friends, have all died of cancer. Every colleague, friend, coworker, anytime they talk about cancer, it's always the same. I don't ever want to get cancer because I don't want to die. You talk to people who have cancer, they tell you the horror stories, not just of their cancer, but of their struggles, of their treatments, of all the side effects, and you don't know where to turn. You have no idea what to do. Do you get a second opinion? Do you just roll the dice? You want to just stick your head in the sand? It's just too much. I want you to know that you guys are very special, courageous, wonderful people. You guys are worthy of, and not just every resource that Angel and I and the CROC Nation and the CROC organization could provide, but everybody, the National Cancer Institute, every support group out there. This is not a competition on who's the best and who's a better podcast and who's a better support group. All of us are only after one thing, and that's your mental health. That's about your struggle. And we will not rest until this disease is cured. This is the part of the program where I just want to let you know that it's not just me and Angel that are pulling for you. It's not just our board of directors. It's not just, Michael and Charlotte who are after your cure. It's so many millions of people who look up to you, who admire you, who just think you're just absolutely the cat's meow. We absolutely adore you. We love you. We thank you for listening. We thank you for taking your precious time to listen to see if we have any small nuggets of assistance that we could be for you. Our lines are open. I answer my cell phone. Angel answers his cell phone. We read and we respond to our emails. If there's anything we could do, any advocacy, any acts of kindness, any acts of friendship we can be to any of you guys out there, we are here for you. And we just want to let you know that our prayer for you and our goal for you and our words to you end each podcast exactly the same. On behalf of Angel, myself, and the board of directors, the entire CROC organization, we wish you all a very long, healthy, happy, and cancer-free life. God bless you. God be with you. Peace.